and scouted out projects and visited with our ministries and got a good feel as to what the true climate is down there, because I know every one of you have a question about what's going on down there. You read things, you hear things, and I think these guys can give you a true indicator of what is really going on. So,
okay, two things I'm going to address this morning. Secondly, will be a little bit about the itinerary and some of the things we're going to do this year. But first, I wanted to address the issue which a lot of people have heard about, is the violence in Mexico. It's something that's significant. It's been there for quite a few years, but more significant today than it's ever been. And wanted to give you the best information we had so everybody can make the best decisions that they can in regards to whether they want to be part of the trip. Like Doug just said, we spent about 8 or 9 days down on the border. We talked to 35, 40 people to get their opinions from varying different kinds of backgrounds, whether it be pastors or missionaries or just people that we know, friends, things like that. Everybody pretty much told us the same thing, that you have to take precautions. It's not like it was. At the same time, every single person, without exception, said you should not come because of it. Okay? We went to all of the areas. We visited all the people, all the sites we're going to be at. Couple things to remember. The first thing to remember is where we're going is not Juarez. Okay, Juarez is far and away the worst place. It's way worse than any other place by far. We're not close to that. The second worst place is probably Tijuana. Okay, we're not going there, and a lot of people do go to Tijuana, even though that is also probably the second most dangerous place. Third most dangerous place is probably the small towns. And they're close to where we go from Acuña down to Matamoros. There are many small towns on the Mexican side that we go to that are very, very dangerous, that we don't go into those towns. Towns like Miguel Alemán, which is across from Roma. We'll go through Roma. Mir, little towns like that where the cartels have taken over the whole towns. We're not going into those areas. The 4 towns that we go to, Acuña, pretty much is fairly safe. Not that there couldn't be things happening, but it's been fairly safe in Acuña. There have not been any bad things happening. Matamoros and Reynosa are fairly hot spots, but they're very sporadic how it happens. Usually if something happens, it's because of an incident that's happened. Understand, and we don't understand everything either, but we've done a lot of work on finding out information. The reality of the situation is there's 2 cartels in this area that are fairly dominant: the Gulf Cartel and the Zetas. Okay, the Zetas came out of the Gulf Cartel. They were like the hitmen for the Gulf Cartel. They split off about 6 months ago. They're the Gulf Cartel, or the drug dealers primarily, have been doing it for a long time. Not that violent in concept. The Zetas, very violent, and they're the ones that do a lot of the most violent stuff. They fight with each other. Most every situation is when they fight with each other. The second most dangerous place to be is when the military is fighting with the cartels. Okay? So those are the situations where most of the problems happen. Most of the problems happen if you're involved in those areas or those places. Now, there are times when it spreads out just to normal areas, and so we're going to be very careful. Some of you may have heard just even in the last day or two, I think it was Thursday afternoon, in Matamoros, the #1 guy of the Gulf Cartel was killed by the military. So the last couple days have been pretty hot spots in Matamoros and Reynosa. The Zetas see this as a possible weakness, and so they can try to come back in. Because in the Reynosa-Matamoros area, the Zetas have kind of lost that battle. The Gulf Cartel kind of controlled those cities. So that's the way the situation is, okay? Based on those things, we are making, well, let me go to the last point. Nuevo Laredo is the other city that we've gone to the last couple of years. Now, we didn't go to Nuevo Laredo for many years. The last couple of years, we've gone into Nuevo Laredo, which is across from Laredo. And this year we are not going into Nuevo Laredo. We made that decision based on we just don't think it's safe to go. So that's why we're not going there, and why we are going into Reynosa and Matamoros. Okay? We are making significant amount of adjustments to try to be as safe as possible. I'm going to give you some of those things that we're doing this year just so you have an idea, and feel free to talk to us afterwards if you have anything. Besides not going to Nuevo Laredo, we are not going to be out driving in the Mexican side after dark. So those adjustments are being made so that we're not going to be, as an example, in the past, we would arrive in Reynosa at 1 o'clock in the morning and just go to our hotel in Mexico. We wouldn't do that because that would be taking us into Mexico after dark. Every van has radios and GPSs in them, so everybody will know exactly where everybody else is whenever they need to. We're going to do a little different job as far as caravanning. We're not going to have a 10-van caravan. We'll have probably no more than 2 or 3 vans riding together. Drivers and shotguns will get specific instructions about certain things to do or not to do. Everybody will be in the loop and that kind of a thing. We'll be taking direct routes. We're not going to go on some back streets or some shortcuts that we know because we're very familiar with the areas. We'll be taking direct routes. If we need to, we'll have people from some of our partners in Mexico guiding us, leading us if we need them to. In Reynosa, as an example, the bridge that you're always used to going across in Reynosa, we're not going to use that bridge. We're going to use the new bridge, which is north of that, and it funnels out really close to where the Dome Church is and Rio Bravo Orphanage is. Okay, so that's an example of a route change that we're going to be doing this year. We will be in constant communication with our partners. We will before we go across the border, we'll be seeing what's happening. Is there anything happening? So we're well aware of it all the time. We are well aware of websites, Facebook, Twitter, up-to-the-minute stuff, sites that we know. I mean, literally everybody that's in those areas can put things up to the minute, and we'll be aware of those things and following those things really closely. We are not picking any projects this year that are in outskirts or smaller places or into smaller areas. For some of you that may remember some places, like an example where Francisco and Lulu's church is, it's kind of a long drive into going through a bad area on the highway and then going in some roads. That's an area that we would not go to this year. We are also putting larger signs on our vans. They'll be on the sides of both vans so that we're visible, just that we're doing God's work and we're not, people not having any idea who we are. And the side of the van will just say things like, in Spanish, it'll say, sharing God's love. Things like that. Big signs on the vans. We are not staying in any hotels in Mexico. Both weeks we are planning on spending one night in Mexico at Rio Bravo Orphanage, which for the veterans, Ray Hansen's place. The reason for that is it's an enclosed compound. It's actually easier to get there than it will be to get out of Mexico because it's going to be getting close to dark at that time of day. We'll be having dinner there and feel like that's a real safe place for us to be. Things like joy tours, that's going to be something we're not going to do as much of this year. That's kind of going into just bad areas and just individually, trying to bless people. We'll still do some tours in Acuna with Pat, but we're not going to do like a smaller tour where we're getting in a van and go out and just hand out stuff to people that we find. A couple other small changes that we're making. For the people that will be on week 1, the Dome Festival that we did for the kids, we always do that Sunday afternoon, we're moving that to Saturday afternoon. Just because we wouldn't be able to finish the festival before dark on Sunday and be out of Mexico. And lastly, another thing that we are doing, because of keeping up to date on things, if things change minute by minute, we will have backup plans to do on the American side at every location. So a lot of things that we're taking into consideration, and if anybody has any specific questions about those, I'd be glad to answer them, or we can talk afterwards. Okay, in regards to our itinerary, I'll go through week 1 and week 2, just giving you a little bit of changes. This is mainly for the veterans, for the rookies. You'll kind of see it as we go. The itinerary will start being built on the website. You can look at that. In this next week, it'll start growing more and more, but that will change. Even though it says something on the website this week, it doesn't mean it wouldn't change in the next couple weeks or month. But week 1, the big difference for week 1, it's always been Wednesday to Wednesday. It's Monday to Monday this year. So the flow will be close to the same, but it's going to feel different if you've been on week 1 before, because you're going to be in different places on different days. The big difference will be when we leave Acuna and Del Rio, we get to Laredo area. We're not going into Nuevo Laredo, so all our projects are going to be in El Cenizo, which is on the American side. For those of you that have come for a few years, 3 and 4 years ago, we went to El Cenizo and did some work there. David Burkett, who was the guy in charge of Faith Mission in Laredo, has a complex in El Cenizo. We're going to do a lot of work at his place. David's going to share in a few minutes about all the projects and some miscellaneous projects in El Cenizo. And then normally from there we go to Reynosa. Week 1 we'll go all the way down to Brownsville, and we'll go to the Bible school before we go to Reynosa. Come back to Reynosa, go to church at the Dome Church, have lunch, and go to San Antonio from there. So that's a little change for the people that are going week 1. For the people that are going week 2, what you're used to is a reversal where we start in Reynosa and work our way back to Del Rio. It'll feel really different for those guys because it's going to be an identical trip. We'll start in Del Rio and work our way around. So it's going to feel really different. Rather than doing the reverse, we're doing it the same way. The difference is if you've been on week 1 before and now you're going on week 2, it's going to feel almost identical. Because when we go from Laredo or El Cenizo down, we will go to Reynosa first, go to the church first, and end up at Magdiel at the Bible school. Week 2 has not gone to Magdiel in the past, and we are going there this year. So that's going to be the big change for there. Doug mentioned it. Dave is going to talk about the projects here in a second, specifically the building projects. But one thing that's probably going to happen this year, and so be ready, for most everybody, you're going to do more building than you've done in the past. More people will have building assignments than they've had in the past. We're probably going to have a little bit more. You're assigned to build the church in the morning and you'll stay in that church in the afternoon. Things like that. Because we have less projects going different places this year, and we have less other things that we're doing just because of making some adjustments. Things like going bowling or going to the zoo or joy tours or just things like that. We're doing a little bit less of that this year. So be ready to do a little bit more building, which for some people, that's going to be a great thing. For other people, it's going to be a little bit tougher. So get ready for that. Get yourself in shape. Start thinking about that. Any question you have about projects, David will address as soon as he's done. Anybody else have any questions for me? Mike?
I have a procedure for crossing the border. Is that tightened up? Or?
It's tightened up in that they're checking almost every van going in. Sometimes the American side are checking the vans before you get there, and almost every van is being pulled in. On the scout out trip, we got pulled in probably more than half the time, but they opened the doors and just let us go. So we're not taking a lot of stuff in. We're always careful with what we take in, but it might be a little bit slower. Coming across the border, there's a little bit less traffic, but that's taking a little bit longer. They'll probably look at all our vans because of so many people. It's going to take a little while to get back across the border. And we are going to come back across the border a little more than we have the last couple of years because of staying on the American side 2 nights more than we have the last few years. The last few years we've stayed in Mexico 3 nights. This year we're only staying in Mexico 1 night. So, question?
Dinner with the pastors, is that going to change? Or
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The dinner with the pastors?
We are going to have dinner in the upper room in Acuna. That's the one time that we will be in Mexico at night, based on Acuna being much safer than every place else. And we leave the upper room, it's about a half a mile drive right to the border. We feel very comfortable and confident. We address that issue. It's a very, very important thing to them. And it's a neat thing for us. And we're very comfortable that that's a safe thing. And so that's the one place that we will be in Mexico at dark, only in Acuna for the one night, and it's about a half a mile drive to the border from the restaurant. It's a straight shot.